Howdy, everybody. We're back with some RPG horror stories. Our first story is one that really isn't a horror story yet, and it's from user Hellholt, and is titled, Player Doesn't Want to Give Me Their Character Sheet. I'm a first-time DM in a campaign with 6 of my friends. Me and 4 of the players have never played D&D. The 2 remaining players have some limited experience. I'm a huge fan of world building and love geeking out about fantasy worlds, which is why the campaign will take place in a fully homebrewed continent with custom countries, cities, history, and story times. That's a lot for a first-time DM. I have bought the books, watched Critical Role and Dimension 20, played Baldur's Gate, as well as browsed D&D subreddits and TikToks to learn as much as I could about how D&D works. It's a smart person. We had a session 0 pretty early after agreeing to try out D&D together, where I explained that what D&D is and how it's played to the other new players, and we agreed on how we wanted to play, etc. We also decided on what classes they each wanted to play in order to ensure a balanced and diverse team. Can't blame them on that. The session 0 took longer than we expected, and we didn't have time to help the new players build their characters and make their sheets, which we then did one-on-one in the following weeks. And now I've received 5 out of the 6 character sheets fully finished with stats, backstory, etc. Now, the reason that I'm making this post. One of the players with experience in D&D, told me that he won't be giving me his sheet and only will be giving me the backstory. That's sussy. His reasoning is that he never had to give the full sheet to a DM before, don't want me, the DM, to know what he can do, which I found a bit weird, and came off as a DM versus PC mentality. Red flag. DM versus PC mentality is just horrible. It turns everything into a competition. The DM should know what PCs are capable of. They should know what their stats are and what they have on them on top of their backstory. Always have your players share their initial sheets and any sheets when they level up at the very least. DMs need to know what their players can do to better balance encounters or provide challenge and stuff like that. Continuing. I want access to his sheet so I can prepare myself on what abilities he might use and won't have to look them up mid-session. I also want access to his character's background, backstory, and personality traits, etc., so I can place it into the world I've built and give his character a personal storyline, which I have done with all the PCs. My question is he right? Is it normal to send the full character sheet to the DM before the game starts? And have I misunderstood the relation between PC and DM? I thought that I, as a DM, had to know everything about the PC as well as the world around them. You've not misinterpreted, OP. This is not normal. I'd be personally concerned as a DM if a player refused to show me their sheet. Got a question. What are they trying to hide? That's literally the only reason to not share a character sheet. You don't want your DM to know something. Is it because you lied about your stats? Is it because you're adding a homebrew class that we didn't agree on beforehand? Is it because you're adding abilities, feats, spells, items, etc. that you shouldn't necessarily have on you? You also haven't misunderstood the relationship between player and DM. TTRPGs are generally meant to be collaborative, especially with a system like 5e. OP continues, edit. Thanks for all the replies. After reading the replies, it's clear to me that I need to nip this in the bud. So I have told him that I will require his full character sheet before we can begin playing, and that the PC versus DM mentality will have no place in our campaign. Yes, if a player cannot provide their sheet ahead of time or in a timely manner, they should not be allowed to play. You need to know what they are bringing to the table and need to ensure things are fair for all players. Edit 2. I feel I need to clarify some things based on some of your comments. I realize that a table of 6 players is probably too many for a new DM, and I'd probably agree so, and 4 new players, but we're a friend group that decided to try out D&D together, not a group of randoms. So it was either all 7 of us or none of us. That is a valid reason to have that many players. If you guys are going to basically be all or nothing, it totally makes sense. Perfect situation, perfect world. Ideally, you really should only DM for 3 to 5 max, but it's completely understandable in this situation. I feel like if it's a group of friends like this and they're all looking to try it, they are all going to be super go with the flow, or more likely to be, because they're all kind of learning and helping each other out. Versus if it's a table of randoms, then you've got potentially a whole crock pot of different personalities, and that could be not fun. Not related to the point above, I'm not going to kick him out of the group, even if he doesn't give me the full sheet. We're still a friend group of many years, and I am not going to start drama over D&D. And I can understand that. Gotta choose your battles sometimes. Regarding all of the homebrew, I realize that I may have bit a bit more than I can chew as a new DM with no real experience, but the prep work and world building is my way of having fun with D&D. And I won't force my players to explore all the stuff I prepared. It's just as much for my own enjoyment as it is for the players. And that makes sense. It can be very tempting to initially do a homebrew world. Perhaps you don't have access to the books. I will say one of the issues when you first get into like a system like 5e, for example. So like normally when you get into 5e, if you were to go to the store or something, or if you were to go like a local friendly game store, they would probably go, hey, yeah, if you're going to DM, you're going to need the player's handbook, you're going to need the monster manual, and at the very least, the DM's guide. So that's 3 things. And they're like $50 a pop too. You know, it's not a cheap investment. So I completely understand just buying those to begin with, because if you get them at local game stores, they tend to be about $50 in my area. If you buy them online, you can usually get them cheaper. I know Amazon sells a lot of the books for cheaper. Problem with buying on Amazon is you're not supporting your local game store, and I highly recommend you do when you can. Those provide a location for people to play, and sometimes they don't charge to be there, and so like that's kind of how they make their money. So they can provide a place to play at, especially if you utilize a game store. Please do patronize that game store if you can, just so they keep your doors open and you also have a place to play them. But when you get those initial things, the DM's guide is a lot. All the books are a lot when you first open them up. And the DM's guide will give you information, especially the 2014 one's the one I have the most experience with. It gives you a crap ton of information. Tables, gives you ideas, but there's no like concrete world. It's not like, hey, this is Faerun. Faerun has these nations. These nations have these cities. They also have these deities. These are what these deities look like. Like those aren't there. You have to either find it online, like through one of the various wikis that's out there, or you need to buy a supplemental book that contains an adventure in it, which is another good way to start running it. Is you get all those materials. If you've got a little extra money and don't want to do the prep work, buy one of the supplementals. They will run you through a whole adventure. There's a ton of different flavors. It's like an ice cream store. It walks you through everything from the starting levels all the way to the end levels. They're usually very user-friendly. Do something like that. But I can understand you want to homebrew because you get those, you just buy those initial 3 books and you're looking at them and you're like, wow, this tells me nothing. Like, I got to prep a world now. Now you got to build that world. To wrap it up here, though, I know that my friends and all will enjoy personal storylines being included in the campaign. I asked in session 0, and since I will do that for all the other players, I don't want him to feel excluded. During our session 0, I didn't pretend that I knew more than the experienced players, and I actively drew on their experiences and advice when we were discussing how we were going to go about the game. Update, just a short and undramatic update. So as most of you guys recommended, I told him that I wanted him to send me a copy of his sheet and that we won't be doing a DM versus table thing, and that I needed to see it for several reasons, including balance and prep. He understood and agreed to send the sheet when he got home from visiting family. I'd like to once again thank everybody for their advice, support, and critique. It helped me greatly, and I'm still excited to start playing. So I gotta say, I'm really glad they figured this out peacefully. Sometimes you don't really need to just ban a ban a player, but you just need to have a conversation. Hopefully this player doesn't continue to cause problems. I would have me having the years of DMing that I do and experience with tabletop, I might be a little concerned if I had a player who was this aggressive coming out of the gate. To me, that would be aggressive, not wanting to show their character sheet. Perhaps they just haven't at all the other tables they've played at, or the limited tables they've played at, so they just didn't think anything of it. But I would potentially be a little concerned, so I'd be keeping an eye on them in the back of my head later on, just to be like, hey, I've kind of run into an issue with them before. There might be another hiccup along the way at some point too. Our next story is going to be from user Earth Sephiroth Edna, titled "My First Exposure to a Social Combat Subsystem Soured Me on It for More Than Half a Decade." This will be an interesting one. My first exposure to a social combat subsystem soured me on it for more than half of a decade. Here's an anecdote from sometime around 2011. I was playing the Dresden Files RPG, my very first Fate RPG. Fate is an RPG system, just like 5e is a system, just like Pathfinder is a system. There's tons of different systems out there and sometimes people will build stuff within that. Fate is one of those. I personally don't have any experience with it. Let's chug along to see where this goes. Purely out of cheekiness, the GM decided to set the game in the city of Dresden. I do not recall what the GM's precise logic was, but the GM also set the game a year or two before the bombing in World War II. For those of you who don't know, Dresden is a city in Germany that got bombed to absolute shit. It didn't get an atomic bomb dropped on it, but it did get absolutely wrecked during World War II. One of the character types in the game is a changeling, half human, half fae, often born to either the Summer Court or the Winter Court. My character was the son of a Malk, a type of feline fae in the setting. For those of you who have heard the phrase half fae cat boy, Before, yes, this was the exact character. I've heard of Catboys. The fallout from this incident completely engulfed one little corner of the internet at the time and spilled out from there. My character's Fae parent was a Sidhe, a noble with more powers than the standard variety. He was a Sidhe of the Winter Court, the edgier of the two main Fae factions. My character was a Winter Courtier in turn, but refused to partake in any cruelty. Generally, if I'm remembering my Fae correctly, the Summer Court tends to be the quote-unquote good Fae Court, and the Winter has a tendency to be the more quote evil Fae Court. It is very open to interpretation. Fae have a tendency to be very chaotic in a lot of different systems. One supernatural ability I took on my character was a few seconds ahead. It gives the character a passive precognition ability. You may roll your lore skill to defend against physical or social attacks or maneuvers. My character had virtually no social defense otherwise. The game started shortly into the very first scene. One other PC, a pure mortal human, took my character inside a church. This was supposedly for the sake of protection. Churches in this setting are a type of, quote, threshold, significantly dampening or nullifying many supernatural powers. A lot of lore and stories have churches being like a hallowed ground sort of thing, so that kind of tracks. It turned out that this other PC was deeply against the Winter Court and wanted my character to betray it. The player declared that their PC was entering social combat with my own character, with the intent of flipping my character against the Winter Court. They pointed out that a few seconds ahead was a supernatural power, and the GM agreed that the church would fully shut it down. This was a ploy all along. That sounds kind of metagaming. I refused, but the GM said that this was a valid social combat and that I couldn't not simply refuse it. Okay. So I don't know how the Dresden Files RPG works, or the Fate system specifically. I don't think it's probably PvP based. A lot of systems out there are really not built for PvP. They're meant for more collaborative and cooperative play. I believe that there is something missing here. Not that OP's not saying something, but I believe what is happening here is that the discussion did not occur ahead of time. If you're going to have PvP at your tables, any kind, be it social combat, actual combat with weapons, you need to talk this out. You need to. What you do with combat is you potentially remove one player's agency and one PC's agency. A lot of people get defensive when their agency gets taken, and it's completely understandable. This is a valid concern to not want to participate in this. This is another PC attempting to remove the agency of another PC. This should have been talked about beforehand. Also, it kind of sounds a little bit here like the player playing this PC is metaing a little bit. Perhaps they heard from the player at the table. They're like, oh yeah, I really love my, Winter Court half fake femboy catboy person. He's got this cool ability for his social. He's like sucks at social combat. So I've got this thing to help like curtail that. And I get a feeling that PC, that player in their head went, I can push this angle here if I force them into a church. And I have a whole lot of issues with people who meta. I think meta ruins the game for a lot of people. I think it ruins your ability to explore and learn the world. Like, yes, you hit a point when you play games that you end up metaing because you've like played the game for so long, but there's ways to get around that, For example, trolls are usually in most world vulnerable to fire damage. But there's always a way around that. And it's mainly just asking to roll if your player knows that kind of shit, or your PC knows that kind of shit or not. Continuing though, I stood my ground and continued to refuse. An argument ensued. The game crashed and burned right then and there during the very first scene. The fallout was enormous. I continued to play with that GM for a few more games, during which they mistreated me rather badly. I do not know why I stuck around around at the time. Concurrently, I played the Dresden Files RPG under a different GM, but alongside the same player. This one okay, though we slowly broke apart for a more uneventful reason. It kind of sounds like this GM, whatever you want to call them, is kind of taking out their anger on this player. I think this is a situation where they just need to find a new table and maybe not play with that other player. It took me over a decade to even consider trying a social combat subsystem in an RPG again. Exalted 3Es looks fine, I suppose. I have also played out negotiations and draw steel over a dozen times by this point. It is okay, but it gets very repetitive. It is easy for PCs to ace right at level 1, and it gets more and more trivial as levels go up. For reference, here's what the Dresden Files RPG has to say about a PC losing a social combat. Let's consider an intimidation conflict for a second. Your character came into this bar to rescue a friend who's being held in the back room. Not wanting to just bust heads, your character goes in, gets a drink, and starts asking around. This leads to an intimidation conflict with a thug there, which your character handily loses and gets taken out. You've taken a moderate consequence of shaken resolve during the conflict. The GM, controlling the thug, suggests that your character leaves the bar because he's afraid of getting into a fight with the thug and his friends. This doesn't have to mean that your character runs screaming from the bar or anything like that. People often play off their emotional responses as being less significant than they really are. It's not out of scope to take the GM's suggestion and apply with, okay, well, ... If I leave the bar, I'm not giving them the satisfaction of knowing that my character is that scared. I'll keep an eye contact with the thug and simply reply, don't get comfortable and think that this is over. It's not by a long shot. I'll throw some cash in the bar and back out slowly. See, your character didn't turn into a screaming ninny, but still fulfilled the dictates of the conflict result. So what now? Is your friend totally screwed? Absolutely not. It just means your character is worried about getting into a fight with all those people. So the frontal approach is out of the question. That doesn't mean your character can't suddenly change tactics and try to sneak in the back of the bar to do the rescuing. If your character tends to solve problems with his fists and has a low stealth, it makes the scene a little more tenser and potentially challenging. The consequence of shaken resolve also provides opportunities for roleplay. The rescued friend might ask about the change in tactics. Dude, I expected you to trash the place with a smile. What gives? Or there might be a scene later where your character reflects on what happened. You know, for the first time in, hell, maybe ever, I think those guys actually got to me. Man, I must be losing my touch. And finally, the consequence is going to go away at some point, leaving your character ready to turn the tables on that thug if you should confront him again. At the end of it all, your character is even more the courageous badass because he got hit with serious adversity and came out swinging on the other side. This can be especially poignant with mental conflicts where the consequences are more deep-seated and have the potential to be transformative to the self. So what that kind of tells me is that if something goes a certain way with the social combat stuff, it doesn't mean it's concrete and fully you're fucked. I think what was probably happening in this situation, OP didn't fully push clarification on it, is the player who was social combating his PC was attempting to force his hand fully. So instead of maybe potentially the social combat causing OP's PC to maybe question their loyalty to the Winter Court a little bit more, the PC that was trying to, like, I'm going to say intimidate here, was going to hopefully like just auto force their hand. This kind of happens in other games too. I have had players in 5e who they have a tendency to be very charismatic characters, bards, people who just have ridiculously high charisma scores, and they're like, sometimes they will be like, okay, I'm going to RP with this other player. I want to convince them to do X. I want to convince them to go spill a drink on that guard. Who they're trying to convince, maybe they talk to them in RP, like, hey, Steve, you should go over there and spill your beer on that guard, distract him so we could sneak by. And Steve goes, nah, fuck that, I don't want to do that. Some players, unfortunately, kind of get this, I'm going to call it PvP mentality, where they go, I'm going to roll persuasion and force him to go do that, thinking like persuasion somehow magically like a charm effect or something for other players, and that's not how it works. It's not cool. It takes agency from the other players. It's wrong. This table needed to upfront, even if it's an expected part of the system is PvP, needs to clarify and let everybody know, hey, this system has this sort of stuff in it. You need to be ready for that. Or, hey, the system normally doesn't include PvP, but my table, we are perfectly okay with that. So don't be surprised. You can also do PvP against other players. I'm not saying you should never do it. Personally, I don't like it, but there's those tables that want to do that. This should have been clarified ahead of time. This is causing a lot of concerns here for this player in OP, and it's also kind of shitty because they're trying to essentially force their hand, and it's unfortunately just soured the entire table, and clearly it soured OP's thoughts on, social combat for a really long time. Personally, I've never done social combat systems. It'd be kind of interesting to try out sometime. I'll have to check out some Fate RPG system of some sort, be it Dresden Files or something else, and just see what's out there. But personally, I've never been into that. Before we jump into our last story, I do want to chit chat about something real quick. Still working on the Star Wars 5e video. I need to have it out before the end of the month. Also, stream on Twitch during the week. Usually during the nighttime, Central Time, Would love it if you check me out. Links are in the description. But to keep it rolling, our last story for the day is from user Nye Orland Hotep. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Titled The Player Who Always Betrayed. Warning, this story includes an instance of fictional, i.e. in-game, sexual assault. That makes me a little nervous. More than 30 years ago, we had a player in our group who had a consistent problem, or consistent pattern. Campaign after campaign, system after system, he would turn on the group, and he always felt he was justified, always righteous, always sure he was in the right. At first, it was almost funny. In an old D&D campaign, I was playing an elf, and he was a dwarf. One day, he decided my elf was arrogant and guilty, just like he sometimes accused me, outside of the game, of considering himself superior. Even if I didn't notice that at the time, I certainly was the kind of guy who easily turned sarcasm on others, and I assumed that others never took those jokes seriously. But we were friends, I trusted that guy, and I was always there for him, both in-game and in real life, and a couple times in real life and in the game. I really had to go the extra mile to help him out. Nonetheless, he decided his character hated mine and that his dwarf would hire a dragon to kill me. Sweet Jesus. Yes, hire a dragon. He heard rumors one lived nearby, went to find it, and offered gold to have my character assassinated. The dragon listened attentively to his story and then grilled him. That, at least, was poetic. And that's really fucking... Did the DM never step in and just, or like the entire group was just like, hey, Steve, cut it out? Like, you turning on us is boring as shit. In another game, some months later, he did it again. This time I suggested he try playing an elf. Maybe that would give him the superiority he wanted. Sounds like OP might have been egging him on a bit here. Or at least for once getting him out of playing the wounded, oppressed underdog. He agreed. I played a human mage. Together with the elf character of another player and my mage's hirelings, we were hired to take down a drake in a nearby cave. This, a lot of dragons. My own people in my own campaign, if you're watching this, do not comment on the fact that I mentioned a lot of dragons. In my current campaign, for those of you who are unaware, I have an encounter table, and if you roll pretty darn high, like 99, 100, depending on where you're located, a dragon shows up, just because I'd be like, who's going to roll a fucking 99 or 100? And there's been one, two, three, four, like 5 or 6 instances of dragons showing up. Multiple times it's led to combat. It's been very interesting. This has been a very dragon heavy one. You'd think I was really into dragons, and I'm not. I think they're cool, but I'm not like one of those dragon dudes. God, they're gonna think I'm like into dragons. Whatever. Continuing. When we got close, I suggested a plan. Set a trap, lure the drake in, and ambush it. He called me a coward and called for a frontal all-in attack. I said that wouldn't work. He said he and the other elf would take the treasure for themselves if I wasn't willing to join them in their frontal attack. Christ. I told him that I would not sacrifice myself and my hirelings on such a brainless endeavor. He and the other elf charged in, got wrecked, I saved them, patched them up, killed the drake with spells and my loyal hirelings using a variation of my original plan. When dividing the treasure, I gave 2 shares to myself, 1 to each hireling and 1 to each of the 2 elves. He was incensed by my, quote, treason. After much complaining, he shut up, but he was silently planning revenge. Okay, the DM really needs to be stepping in here and being like, yo, you guys gotta chill the fuck out. That should not be happening at all. Versus player sucks, dude. I know some tables love it, and that's great. I'm so happy for you, other tables, but don't fucking do it. He took that gold and used it to hire criminals to murder me, or rather, he tried. He flaunted his fortune in the seediest tavern in town and nearly got himself killed. Yep, that'll happen. I had followed him while invisible, suspecting something stupid. I called the guards and saved him again. Just let him die. You know, if you have a player who's just constantly trying to kill your character, let's let their PC die. And that's me. His reaction? Accused me of being an arrogant human who thinks he is superior to metahumans. That kind of tracks, at least. You know, oftentimes like a trope is that elves are super arrogant and like douchey. So, I mean, at least he's like sticking with the, standard role play. Then he spent the rest of the campaign trying to kill me. For the sake of the game, I made up some in-fiction reason why my character would tolerate this. Man, OP is a saint. It became exhausting. I had many chances of letting his character be killed, the drake, the tavern, and several situations after that, and I always helped him. And the more I helped, the angrier and the more offended he got. It was like some sort of vicious cycle, but my character didn't really have it in him to let him be killed. Eventually, we had to stop the campaign, and all the hard work of the game master had to be discarded. Thank God. We kept playing together over the years. One of the games we played the most was Vampire the Masquerade, which I would actually like to try at some point. I was a storyteller in those games. The same pattern eventually emerged. He would build relationships with other characters. Then, first time they did something he didn't like, he would reason they were prejudiced and exploitive, betray them, and murder them. Okay, you as the storyteller also need to step in, OP, and stop this, unless you're allowing this at your table. I feel like this is a table that allows PvP. Once, in a Camarilla campaign, he turned on 2 fellow PCs who had been utterly loyal to him and joined the Sabbat. Destroyed one by shooting him in the back during a fight, killed another by sending his new Sabbat back to hunt him after luring him on trust to an ambush. One player quit the game over it. I fucking wonder why. And in the 2 following campaigns, he did it again and again. Okay. Okay. Just talk to him. Just talk to him. Be like, you cannot do this. I, as the storyteller, do not allow you to do this. Sometimes you just tell them you can't do it, or they need to stop doing it, or you need to remove them from the fucking table. Oh, God. Why did we keep him in the group? Because we all liked him as a friend. Because he was the first of us to discover RPGs, and because he brought RPGs to us. Because he was passionate about RPGs, and because, to be honest, sometimes his antics were funny. Okay. That's great, and if you love the antics and they're funny, that's wonderful. Problem. You had a player quit the fucking game because he killed them. People get really defensive of their PCs, and I completely understand it. Some people put a part of them into their PCs. Some people use their PCs to branch out of themselves. You know, maybe somebody is very shy and introverted in real life, and as a way to get out of that, they put themselves in this new body, this new skin, and they become Steve the Bard. I don't know why Steve's a common character name. I never name my characters after Steve, but Steve the Bard, he's charismatic and charming, and he's fit, and he, I don't know, fucks all the barmaids or some shit. It allows them to kind of put themselves in somebody else's shoes for a little bit. You know, and some people put a little bit of themselves into that. And you work really hard on your backstories and stuff to make your character work in the world. And you spent like months and months with these characters going on adventures and trials and tribulations. And you fucking lose them because your friend decided to fucking kill you at the table. I can deal with it. I can deal with you're okay with the antics of him trying to murder other PCs. But once he caused another player to quit, I feel like that would be coming to Jesus, quote unquote, moment, coming to Melora, coming to, Bahamut. Hey, maybe we should reconsider this, unless of course you went, oh, well, that was just Randy. Randy's a fucking pussy, in which case you're a fucking dick. I digress. I'm getting off the tracks. I hate PvP, and I'm not okay with PCs turning on each other unless you explicitly discuss it ahead of time. Like, it's not a cool gotcha. It's not a fun gotcha moment. Nobody's like, wow, that was so interesting. I love when this PC plot and planned for 3 months and murdered the entire party in one go and completely ruined our 2-year-long campaign. Wow, I really loved that. Thanks, Bob. So cool. Nobody guys are fucking like that. Continuing though. But there was a moment I'll never forget. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was disgusting. In a fantasy game, I was playing a female elven ranger who was mortally wounded in combat. Oh god. As she was dying, he described to us how his character, a human, touched her inappropriately and licked her face as she bled out. Defense. Oh god, what the fuck? What the fuck? It wasn't a scene. It wasn't in character tension. He just wanted to shock. I guess he did hate elves. But it was also a way to offend me. Even then I did make a scene, I just asked him not to do that again, that is the tamer of responses. It's, again, something else that should be discussed at the table if you're going to allow sexual interactions of sorts and what those limits need to be. Always discuss those. And if those aren't discussed, don't be that fucking weirdo at the table and try to put your hands on somebody's boobs, dick, butt, asshole, vagina, other inappropriate places, dragussies, bussies, whatever ussies are out there. Like, don't do that. Fucking weird. Fucking weirdos. You guys aren't worried, don't worry. It's the people, it's not you, the viewer, it's the other people who are probably the fucking weirdo. Wrapping it up though. Maybe some people today would call it a violation or say that the table was, quote, unsafe. I didn't see it that way. It was our table, our game. I was offended, but I could take it. I just didn't want it repeated. And that's understandable. This table very clearly does not see these sort of things as necessarily a violation or calling a table unsafe. I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say unsafe if somebody does it just once. Sometimes people just don't understand the boundaries. It's good that they were able to talk it out and say they didn't want that to happen. Highly recommend though, highly, 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 even if it's people you've played with a billion times. You need to lay out ground rules. You need to talk things out. You need to be like, hey, these are the taboo things we're going to touch on this campaign or we're going to allow. Just talk it out. Change it as it goes. Tabletops there's a social contract involved. To you, whatever your role is, GM, DM, storyteller, or a player, you all are in a social contract. You all are agreeing to, look out for each other's best interests, to not offend each other, and to try to make everybody feel open and welcome. At least that's what I hope. If not, you're playing a very aggressive table and you might want to reconsider some shit. But thank you guys all for hanging out. That's going to be it for today. Please remember to like, subscribe, and catch me on Twitch. I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, everybody.